Thinking of buying a used Audi S4, S5 here in Canada? Well, there's lots to talk about. Today's video, we're going to talk a bit about maintenance, ownership, winter driving, and all the costs that come associated with buying a used performance German car. So stick around, let's talk it all, and I have got the receipts to back it up on what it takes to own and mod a 10-year-old German sports car. Stick with us. So this here is my 2015 Audi S5. Very similar to the S4. So if you're looking around and shopping, the S4 is the four-door and the S5 is the two-door. The reason why I went with the two-door is you're going to find if you're looking around and browsing, and what I found when I purchased this about 4 or 5 years ago, is the S5s tended to be, at least in Canada where I am in Ontario, a little bit cheaper because the S4 being the four-door is the more practical option. And a lot of people, I guess, who have kids still, that's the way to go. So something to think about when you are considering this platform is if you don't need the four-door and you're really not going to use the back seats much, you might find a better deal with the S5. Now, when I purchased this car, one of the things that I looked for was this specific model. This one has these S4 and S5s, the B8.5 generation they're called. They have a 333 horsepower factory supercharged V6 3-liter engine. Which has a lot of potential. And we're going to talk some about that a little bit later. That said, like any German car, the maintenance is high. These cars have come down a lot, and that's because they have a higher cost of maintenance of ownership maybe than a lot of other cars, Japanese and domestics. So the cost to get into the vehicle, while it might be affordable, you really got to watch the maintenance costs. Now, as far as purchasing goes, you know what? The biggest thing I'm going to recommend is that you get yours, find a good example from a reputable dealership. I actually purchased this one here right at the height of COVID when things were in lockdown. So I bought it sight unseen. That said, I bought it from an Audi dealership. It was certified pre-owned Audi. So I had a level of confidence with that. It came with a little bit of a warranty as part of being a CPO car, that it was going to be a sound example of this car. And it was the right color. It had all the features I wanted. I made a chance, and I bought it sight unseen. The car was delivered to my door, which was great for me. It was an interesting buying experience. But that's my biggest recommendation is you want to make sure that these things have had some sort of inspection done, to looked at. You might pay a little more for that CPO from an authorized Audi dealership, but for me, again, knowing the maintenance that goes into these vehicles and making sure things are up to date, I felt like that was the better, safer approach, to spend a little bit more money up front and get a good example. What about insurance? Well, that is a tough one to say. It really depends on where you live within Canada. Big cities are going to be more expensive. We know that. It also depends on your age, obviously, like any insurance on any other vehicle, and your level of driving experience. So if you're a young guy, maybe it's your first car, probably not the way to go. But you know what? It's super subjective, so we can't say. What I can say is, in relative cost for myself compared to, say, any other vehicles that I've owned in the past, it really hasn't been that significant for me. Again, I'm a little bit older, got some experience, and it all depends on what your insurance provider is able to do for you. I mean, you're going to have to shop around a little bit, but they are safe vehicles. They're not so old that they don't have this, the typical standard safety features, airbags and ABS and traction control and all that stuff is there. So, from a safety perspective, they're a solid, good car. They're a heavy car too. So from that perspective, no safety concerns there, I would say. But it is a 10-year-old vehicle, and maybe it doesn't have like the collision warning detection and things like that you may find in newer vehicles that people might purchase. All right, let's talk maintenance, because maintenance is the key thing that's going to either make or break whether people love this car or regret purchasing it. As I mentioned, maintenance can be a little bit expensive on vehicles like this. And this one is no different than any other German sports car, or sports cars in general, I should say. That being said, there's a couple of things that you really want to make sure that you do first and foremost before you get into any modifications, spending any money on go fast parts or accessories and what have you. There's some things you really got to take care of first. But I've listed out some things here on the basic maintenance to give you a sense for what I experience with ownership and things that I do, to give you kind of an idea. Now, the first one I'm going to say, oil changes are subjective. For me, I've only ever put the best synthetic that I could. I spend the extra money and I put good quality oil into this motor. In fact, I'll show it to you right here. So what I've been using is the Modal 8100. It's pure synthetic. It's been put in since the day one. It's been really good for me. But anyways, spend some quality oil on that. So oil costs, typical for me, about $220 is what I find is pretty average. Again, that's a 5W40 weight oil. I do not drive this car in the winter, and that's by choice. And believe me, it's a great car in the winter, but this is a more of a toy for me, if you will. And keeping it off in the winter just means I can extend its life a little bit. That's my really only reason why. So oil changes around that price. Brakes, again, depends. You can do some of that work yourself. You're going to spend upwards of $1,500 probably easily just to do some pads, maybe some rotors on top of that. Not going to be the cheapest thing. We did some thermostat, water pump items. Oh gosh, $600, $1,200 easily. You can spend on that. They'll need to be done as well. And again, keep in mind, supercharged, which means some things need to be, you're gonna have to pull that supercharger off to do some work in there as well, which adds to the cost, right? The PVC system, which is the oil separator, I did that one, $650. DSG service, so went ahead and had the dual clutch transmission on these cars, had it drained, the clutch plates looked at, refilled, regular maintenance. And again, these are only my costs. Your mileage may vary depending on where you are and what you're willing to pay. But I recommend, just looking at doing the supercharger to take that off was $530 to do that. We talked a bit about the decarbonization. That was $239 to do that. Typical oil change and stuff I mentioned, about $230. The oil separator, since we had this off, the supercharger off, we went ahead and did the oil separator. That was about $438. And then as well, we did a DSG, which was the filter kit, the AT filter, the DSG filter, and the clutch fluid, which all of that was about $358 as well. So, there you go, right off the bat, we're getting pretty close to over $1,000 in just getting it refreshed at the time of purchase. So plan on things like that. We got a bunch of other receipts here. We'll talk a bit about what the mod costs are as well. Now, I mentioned earlier about winter driving and how I don't drive in the winter here. And that was strictly because I didn't need to. I've got another vehicle that's, we got a Jeep that's great for winter use. And this vehicle was more to do what I'm doing, which is racing, modding, and just enjoying the vehicle for what it is. That said, it is a fantastic winter car. So for Canada, as Canadians, this is a great platform. This has the Audi Quattro, which is regarded as one of the best all-wheel drive systems that are out there. It's fantastic. And I have seen a lot of people have a lot of good time and success with these vehicles. Get yourself a set of winter tires. That's going to make or break the difference. If you have a decent set of winter tires on here, this thing is a winter beast. It's fantastic. However, the one caveat is it's pretty low to the ground. So, again, it's a sports car. It's a little bit lower to the ground, so ground clearance may be an issue. If you're in the city where it's well plowed and you don't have to worry about that on winter storms, then you know what? I say you can't go wrong. It's a fantastic car. And I have been in snowstorms, which have come up a little bit unexpected, a little bit early in the season before I got this stowed away for the year. And I've been caught in snowstorms and just on my all seasons, and it did great. But that's, don't be afraid of that. As long as you're in an area where you're not going to deal with a heavy amount of snow and build up and going to be trouble getting through due to the lower clearance than maybe some other vehicle like an SUV. By all means, for Canada, highly recommend it. All right, let's talk interior. Well, you know, it is a 10-year-old vehicle. You're not going to have Apple CarPlay. You're not going to have Android Auto. There is ways I've seen that you can update these MMI systems, they're called, to have some of those more modern features, but um, it's not standard anymore. These cars were before that generation. That said, I think the interior is great in these cars. I love the flat bottom steering wheel. The leather's held up really well. I don't have any cracks or peeling, any seams that have come apart. It's a quality Audi product. So in that regard, no complaints there. I think it's a very, brushed aluminum, a very livable, nice looking interior, and it's held up for its age quite well, in my opinion. You can see the one and only really cosmetic modification I've done to my car, and that are these big red paddle shifters. Again, I like to go to the track, like I said, and do some racing, and the little paddle shifters that were there pretty small. These maybe not for everybody. They're a bit large. They kind of obscure a little bit of my vision of the dashboard, but you know what? I really like it. I think it looks good, but it's more of a functional add-on for me than anything else. Now let's get into the really fun stuff, modding potential. And this is where, to me, this car really shines. There is an exceptional amount of modding potential with this car. And being supercharged from factory, there's a lot you can do just with software. So you can do what's called a stage 1, which is strictly just a software ECU and TCU, so engine and transmission tuning. Usually a flash. There's lots of different vendors to choose from, so do your research, pick one that you like. I went one with the performance shop that they recommended, since they're handling all the maintenance and upgrades on this car. But essentially, with stage 1 alone, you can get from the 333 factory horsepower pretty close to 400 horsepower. I mean, it depends on the tune and how aggressive it is, but there's a lot just to unlock just with software. And that's not getting into anything else. Now, you can do, after that, you can start getting some bolt-ons, which, cold air intake, like you see I've done here. That was through Canadian Auto Performance. Put that in myself. Really, honestly, I don't think it's going to contribute much as far as horsepower goes. I really wanted the supercharger sound. That was the reason for having that. Lots of debate on whether it just introduces heat from the engine bay into it. I understand all that. But I really wanted to hear this motor and the supercharger, I should say. And for that, it does a fantastic job. The next thing I did, obviously you can do with that is you can do what's, a stage 2 flash. So you can go up to the next level. And that is where you will do either a crank pulley or supercharger pulley. So either a larger crank pulley, which is what I went with, so I have upgrade capability later to put a smaller supercharger pulley in. But either way, some folks go right with the smaller supercharger pulley, leave the factory crank on there, crank pulley on, and that'll spin the supercharger up faster. And again, coming along with that, you're going to need to do a software flash. That gets you into like a stage 2. There's a stage 2 plus, where you've done both the upper and lower pulleys. You're getting more boost again. You start wanting to get into things like some cooling stuff. So one of the things that I'm going to be looking to do that I haven't done yet is getting a coolant separator. What that'll do, or a divorce cooling system, they call it. What that'll do is that'll separate the cooling cycle from the supercharger and the engine itself. So right now, the same coolant cycle cools both the supercharger and the engine, which means as your engine warms up, it gets harder for the system to cool down your supercharger. So by separating those, you kind of isolate that coolant so one's not heating up the other. So that's something that I'm going to be doing this year, is in my plans as well. From there, I mean, you can go crazy with exhaust systems. One of the things that I will warn you of now is it is really hard to get these motors to sound well. Right now, I have factory exhaust. However, I have test pipes. And that is because as I continue to mod this car and race it, what you'll find is you're introducing more heat, And those catalytic converters are right up against your manifolds, and they tend to get real hot real fast. And obviously, more power, and depending on how you're using it, like I am, you cook them, which I did. So blew those cats out. We went ahead with test pipes, some titanium test pipes in there, which is great. But you gotta know, it sounds raspy. It sounds real raspy. So one of the things this year as well we're doing, and again, this car is going to be going into the shop soon for its annual maintenance and some new fun parts, and we're going to put in some downpipes with some ultra quiet resonators. That should hopefully help tone it down. What that also caused by putting in the test pipes is now the problem just moved down system. So while I solved the catalytic converter issue that were blown out by putting in test pipes, my flex pipes that were on the down pipes behind the test pipes ended up blowing out as well. So, kind of just, I'm chasing the problem down and goes, but that's the way it is, and that's fine. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to put in some down pipes with some ultra quiet resonators, try and tone down some of that raspiness. But it's just the nature of this motor. So while it's a great platform, super potential, it's real challenging to get this sound well. With that said, you can go all the way up to a stage 3. People are hitting 500 horsepower, maybe even more at this point with this motor. You really start working on some more internal stuff. You can get some supercharger work ported, all on and on. It goes on and on. I mean, they're always pushing the envelope with this platform on what it can do. I've always taken a very incremental approach. So as you may have seen and heard as I'm talking about it, is I like to do a couple of things, run it for the season, do the next year, do a little bit more, or at least partway through the start of the season. And if there's things that I want to add to or upgrade, I'll do that. So it's had a number of flashes. This one is at stage 2. Like I said, with just the lower crank pulley, so a larger crank pulley, up that boost a little bit. And once I have the cooling solved and improved, and potentially an intercooler as well, then I feel more comfortable going to that stage 2 plus and upgrading the supercharger pulley for that extra little bit of power as well. So the TCU tuning as well, given that it's all computer controlled, dual clutch transmission system, very reliable. You can tune that as well, so which we did. We increased the clutch pressure, changed some of the shift points. There's lots you can do with these software packages. So explore your options. Talk, get on the forums anymore, but get on the Facebook groups and do a little bit of research and YouTube videos all over the place on, what are some of the tuning options. You're going to find debate by all sorts of folks over who's the best. So all I can recommend is to do your own homework. I'm not going to personally recommend any one over another, because all that will do is just start internet arguments in the comments section. So I'll leave it to you to do your homework on that. But it is a fantastic platform if that's what you're looking to do. Great capability with these motors. And I just think you can't go wrong with this platform if you want something that can be both a daily driver and a performance car for just having some good times with. And yeah, that's my recommendation. Now, I didn't get into costs on how much the mods were that I did. And again, because it's all over the place. It's a wide range of options. Again, like I mentioned, different software providers, different shops you can go with, different, by Chinese parts. I suppose I don't recommend it, but it's an option. It's all over the place. Expect for a good set of test pipes to be $1,000 to $2,000, depending on what kind of material they're made of. There's, the software flashes could be $700, $500 to $1,000. Again, it varies quite a lot, so it's hard for me to suggest any given price. It's not cheap. And that said, the one thing I want to kind of mention, I did talk a lot a bit about, maintenance costs that you can expect, but keep in mind, again, I keep saying this is a used German vehicle, so you're going to pay those expensive parts. Things like headlights, these headlights have auto leveling. They move when you turn the car on and they self-level. Those motors could go, they're not going to be cheap to replace. Control arms, suspension. You start getting into some other parts that maybe, are not holding up so good with the age. They're not going to be cheap. So, keep that in mind when you're making a purchase. That it's not just the cost that I mentioned on getting it maybe up to date and keeping it maintained year to year. These surprise hidden costs that will pop up at some point, you've got to make sure you've counted into your budget as well. So in the end, would I recommend that you purchase a used Audi S4 or S5? Well, if you want a car that's quick, can be made faster, lots of mod potential, is relatively quite reliable, in my opinion, and is a fantastic winter driver, daily driver in winter here in the Canadian winters, then I don't think you can go wrong. Again, as long as you do your homework, you look for a good example, I think you're going to have a great time with this platform. And honestly, every time I get in it, I feel like I'm driving something special. Its looks hold up to this date, I think, in my opinion. And I get a lot of great compliments with this car. It doesn't look like a 10-year-old car for a lot of people. And I think the design on this vehicle was done exceptionally well. So yeah, I'll leave it to you to decide. And if you already own one of these cars or you're thinking about getting one, let me know in the comments your experience. What have been your experience as ownership or as purchasing, or any questions maybe I didn't answer? Please post them in the comments. I'll be happy to answer any of that I can help provide. And if you want to see more videos on modding, the drag racing this year coming up, and just all the different fun things we plan to do with this car this year, please subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you guys again. Thank you.